Good afternoon, a very warm welcome to our Conversations in Design session. I'm Claire German, Managing Director of the Design Centre. In this exciting format, we're keeping our community engaged and inspired wherever they are. We're bringing together designers, industry insiders and media hosts for some great conversations online. Now more than ever, creating individual spaces that reflect who we are has never been more important. And I'm delighted to introduce interior designer Beata Heuman. We're in for such a treat as Beata's projects are inviting, timeless, but also highly imaginative. She knows how to make a room sing. This promises to be a really inspiring session, and who better to chair it than Hatta Byng, editor of House and Garden. So without further ado, over to you, Hatta, and thank you all for tuning in. Thank you.
Hello to everybody watching. I'm thrilled to be talking to Beata today. I imagine she needs very little introduction to you all. She and her projects have featured many times in House and Garden. And in 2018, she won our first House and Garden Designer of the Year award. And of course, only a month or so ago, she published her first book, Every Room Should Sing, to great acclaim. And it is a life-enhancing, confidence-giving book. And Beata generously imparts her wisdom and her personal take on decorating and what lies behind her original and also very livable interiors. I love the fact that on the one hand, she's talking about unlocking your imagination, and on the other, she's kind of urging us, kind of giving us advice on coping with the mess that life brings to a house. So it covers all. So it's comprehensive. Beata's book has 10 chapters exploring 10 projects, and through that 10 design principles that become the title of each chapter. As she calls them, sort of, you even refer to them in your introduction as things that may be worth considering as your home takes shape. And these things range from unlocking your imagination to making the ordinary extraordinary. And the last chapter bears the name of the book, Every Room Should Sing, and discusses the house in that we recently featured in the magazine, and that I suppose exemplifies the 9 principles that have gone before.
Yeah.
And Beata, how did you come upon the title of the book, Every Room Should Sing?
It's something that I've been saying for a while. I think I was, I don't know, it's just something that kind of came into my head. I can't actually remember the exact moment, but I've been sort of using it as a bit of a catchphrase in a way. It's hard to sum up something in a sentence like that, but that's sort of somehow how I came to
sum it up. And it's that feeling as you go into a room and into one of your interiors, I suppose.
Well, yeah, that's what we're aiming for anyway.
Yeah, the ultimate aim.
But I guess what it means to me is that, you know, that a room should, as well as, you know, being comfortable and hopefully beautiful, I think it's really important that a room, you know, inspires you and energizes you. So it's more about kind of an energy rather than exactly maybe how it looks. It's much more about how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
And when I think something sings, it's a lot about creating a certain tension. There needs to be harmony, but there also needs to be something that's a little bit off, and that's the thing that makes you perhaps take the interior in another way. It needs to take you like a tiny bit by surprise, and that to me is when something sings.
Brilliant. And in the kind of process of, I mean, did you enjoy the process of actually writing the book and looking at your work in this very detailed analytical way, I suppose?
I did really enjoy it. It was a lot of hard work. Yeah. I think more than I anticipated before I started. I'm also pretty specific about what I want. I've never done a book before. I think I drove everyone in my vicinity a bit nuts. Luckily weren't too many people around because I was in lockdown. But it's been really useful to kind of, I mean, I had thought about all these things before, but it was quite good for me to kind of distill it down into these kind of very clear different chapters. And that also now helps me make decisions in terms of what we, what projects we take on and what, work we want to do. It's a lot easier to kind of choose, and it's much clearer kind of what decision we should make in different situations, because I've very clearly put down on paper what matters. So that's been really helpful, and I did really enjoy it. But yeah, I really put my heart and soul into it, and it was a lot of work. So it's kind of nice to have a bit of a break from that.
And you're sort of looking at your work in kind of from an outside point of view in a way, isn't it? Sort of standing back from it. So yeah.
Exactly. And also the other thing that I did find very, I love reading, and I always really liked writing, especially when I was younger. But then obviously English isn't my first language, and but I at the same time really appreciate good writing. So that was also quite hard. I'm not a writer, I'm not a professional writer, but trying to do the best I possibly could with that. And that's probably the most challenging part of it. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. But there was a lot of kind of things to overcome and think about.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of very articulately, each theme is very articulately talked about, and also the sort of personal anecdotes really bring it to life and help the reader understand, I think.
Thank you so much.
Let's go to the project that we want to talk about, which is a house in London. And can you give us just a little bit of a background on this project? What sort of people are your clients, and how did they find you?
In a way, sort of quite similar to me. They're a married couple, sort of, late 30s. They have two children that are, young, like sort of 2, 3, and 5. And he's like a sort of fintech entrepreneur, and she's a book scout. And it was actually, I think, we sort of have some mutual friends, but I think they kind of came to me word of mouth. She sent me an email one day, and it was pretty quick turnaround. So that was in September when I first even started talking to her, and then they moved in end of March. So it was one of the quickest turnarounds we've done, especially a project that kind of size.
And did they have a specific brief? Or
not really. I think actually to begin with, I think having seen work, obviously people might have seen what we've done before. So in the beginning, I felt that they wanted to kind of impress, that they weren't didn't necessarily want something that was like crazy colorful or too over the top, because I guess perhaps that was their one worry, that I would go a bit too far in that direction. So we held it back quite a lot, but then as time went on, you could sort of tell that they wanted something that was a bit more colorful, and that we should add a bit more color. So it evolved a little bit, but they definitely didn't want anything they wanted something that felt kind of quite relaxed and not too sort of interior designed in a way, and something that felt like it had been built over time, which is always really important to us.
Absolutely. And this is the picture of the hall, which is a very sort of joyful image, and you talk, one of, as we've already said, the chapters is called Unlocking the Imagination, and it talks about the importance of creating a home that's exciting and inspiring, and also the idea of walking across the threshold, which we're sort of doing here, right, and being captivated by the details. And here exactly, we see some of these details. Can you just talk us through some of these pieces, kind of the essence of this?
One way of kind of captivating that sort of spirit that I'm talking about is having something that feels almost a little bit surreal. And I think this is quite pared back in terms of the color scheme. The walls are light, you have green, but it's at the same time, it kind of joins, you see the square outside, and I don't know, it seems quite natural to have that there. But the dodo egg pendant that they have, the light pendant that they have in the room, it's at the same time a bit kind of fantastical, a bit not of this world. So I think it kind of gives that impression that you're sort of stepping into something that is a bit different.
Yeah.
And then the velvet wall hanging on the right over the table, that was something actually that they had that I really loved. I like how it feels almost kind of like 70s and quite sort of quite slutty anyway. And then you have that kind of more modernist style sofa on the other side, and the table that we made, it was based on a vintage piece that we'd seen, but then we made it to fit around the radiator, which is also quite practical to have as you walk in and like put your keys down on the table or in that drawer. But I think it's a sort of an example of a color scheme that in a way is quite simple and it's not too much going on, but with some strong reflexive colors and interesting shapes. It's kind of, I don't know, it puts you right there when you walk in, and hopefully will make the person who walks in appreciate the environment.
Yes, absolutely. And sort of the curves of the table and everything, they just kind of are uplifting, I suppose, aren't they? And why is sort of making a house sort of exciting, and the sense of excitement important? I mean, obviously some people want a very peaceful, calm backdrop. Why is exciting?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about, of course, with interiors, there's like 1,000 different ways to do anything, and everyone's tastes differ. But so I guess I go with what makes me feel good, and absolutely. I just find those kind of environments quite inspiring. I think the sort of energy it gives you is uplifting.
Yeah,
I guess I like feeling sort of entertained as well. I like feeling happy. I also like kind of having fun.
Yeah.
The people I like, the people, my friends, the people I like the most are always people who have, quite a dry sense of humor, or, might not always say exactly what you think they're going to say. And the kind of it's a bit reflected in the interiors that we do too. So that's the kind of thing that makes me feel, happy and inspired. But obviously with others, it might be something completely different.
It's just interesting to kind of discuss. And another thing that you all said, I mean, the opening chapter to your book is called "What is Home?" and the idea of home is very important to you and to your work, and you talk very much about kind of that we all need to have an honesty in kind of thinking who we are and making sure our houses reflect who we are. But when you're designing for a client, you're obviously designing for somebody else. So how do you try to capture that?
So it's all about getting to know them, and there's kind of different ways of doing that. So I think sitting down, just like talking about this and that doesn't, we'll ask questions about, what's important to them, and what I often ask actually what they think is lacking where they're currently living, what they wish they had more of. And you just spending, like an hour with someone, you do slowly but surely get to know them. But one thing that I actually think is almost the most important, other than spending some time together, is I always ask them to send a few pictures of stuff that they really like, because whatever they say, a picture's often, speaks louder than 1,000 words sometimes when it comes to this.
It's very difficult to actually voice what you like, isn't it? Or articulate.
Exactly. And even if you can, it just means something, I might describe something and you get a completely different image in your head than what I have in mind when I say cozy or whatever. So I think that's really useful. It doesn't have to be that many pictures, but like even if it's just 3-4 images of something that they like, we get such a good idea of, their style and what they're after. And then, we'll take that and hopefully make it, much better than, than not necessarily than that, but just like we sort of enhance it, we develop it, and that is kind of how we hopefully get to a point where it becomes a true reflection of who they are. And then I guess the kind of clients we get now, because they will come to us because they see something in the work that we do and they appreciate that. So it gets a bit easier. The longer I do it for, it gets a bit easier because you already have that kind of chemistry before you start. But that's really important. Without that chemistry, it's not really going to work, which is also why it's really important to sort of meet in person and talk about it for the client, for both of our sakes, to make sure that it's a good relationship.
No, I get that. And then for kind of, what is your advice for the sort of rest of us trying to find kind of who we are and how our house reflects ourselves? I mean, there's I'm kind of working on a bit of a project for us at the moment, and there's a sea of things out there, and I have to constantly sort of try and bring myself back to think what I really want and respond to. What is your?
It is hard. So the book like tackles a lot of that. So I have sort of, that's sort of what I'm trying to do in the book, kind of explain a little bit. But I think, it's kind of the same with me when I do something for myself. I sort of take kind of a deep breath, I look through images, and like really try and just tune into the feeling. And like whenever I feel like something that kind of really pulls me, that's where I stop at. And then I sort of like kind of quite slowly and methodically put some things together, and I try and like slightly have blinkers on and just kind of go with my feeling. I also think another thing is, you know, anyone who's interested in interiors will probably save images that you like, and then if someone has been an image that you saved, say a year ago or 6 months ago, if that still is something that you really love, and obviously you would have looked at images for very, very long time, so the images that really stand the test of time that you like,
they bring in the back of your head.
Yeah, exactly. That means that's probably something to go for. So I think the longer you can sit on ideas, probably the better, because a lot can happen in 6 months or a year. So kind of saving things and thinking about it for a while, I think is also a good way of working out what actually is right. And then I also think it's really good to get inspiration from the past. Because if something is like 40 years old and you still like it, that probably means that in another 40 years time you might continue to like it, and that it will stand the test of time. So I think looking to the past for inspiration is quite good as well, and that's also a way of kind of avoiding kind of fads and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's what I constantly fear, is that you've tuned into something so of the now that it will quickly, you'll not want it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's hard to completely avoid that, and like it's also fine to have a bit of fun because you're excited about something, but I guess it's like a mix of different things.
Exactly. No, totally. Well, you're making me feel much better.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I have the same problem, but yeah, you just have to be quite focused and like calm.
Exactly. And what about clients adding to their houses, sort of once you've kind of to a certain extent come to the end, and then what do you feel about that?
I mean, I think it's completely unrealistic to think that that's not going to happen. So that's also why I mean, if we continue to look at some of the slides,
carry on. For the sitting, we can go to the sitting room images.
So here, for example, basically it's unrealistic for me to ever expect that this isn't going to change, and therefore it's really important to just put something together that has a mix of lots of different things in it, so that it's possible to add to it no matter like what they end up feeling like they want to buy in a few years time or whenever it is. And I mean, lots of people, I just think like mixing is extremely important from that point of view, and that's why I think having like a very sort of stylized, just kind of one look fits all, it's just, or I mean, you just get a bit stuck in that. And I think especially when it comes to residential design, it's kind of quite risky if you want to create something that lasts for a long time, so here you see there's quite a lot of different things going on in terms of like stylistically, but somehow it comes together. And also if you go actually into the next slide after this, this is actually because what we just saw was all getting like almost like a bit too tasteful, I thought, and we need to get something that really sort of puts it like just messes with it all a little bit, and something that was a bit strange and a bit off, to then allow for that to also happen in the room, whatever they add later on. So this particular sideboard that we had made, that was inspired by this Jean Rocher piece that we saw. So we made the sideboard with Seb Cox, and then we had a specialist painting put on it. And I think that actually, if that wasn't in the room, it's like a very important part of the room, I think, to have something that's a bit like twisted, even though the colors are still quite, like brown and natural. Again, there's like lampshade could potentially, they're definitely a bit like Marmite probably. This kind of like velvety velour material, and then there's like beaded chairs that was a bit and I think it's really important to have stuff like that in a room, to kind of allow for a bit of everything. I also think that the environment we are in, just it affects us more than we might realize. And I definitely want to be an open-minded person, where I could be serious, I could be silly, we could have fun or not or whatever. So I think having an environment that reflects all those different things and reflects the fact that we are all more than one thing is really important. So that is like a huge part of the kind of designs that we put together.
And creating again this sort of personal feel, isn't it, that it
can
be added to.
Well, that too, exactly.
And you talk a lot in the book about sort of tension and contrast, and the and that is again a sort of elevating the rooms in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. If everything is exactly what you expect when you walk into a room, it's kind of like a melody. If a melody is like always in perfect harmony, it becomes quite boring to listen to. Like there has to be some dissonance, there has to be something that breaks it, because otherwise, or at least otherwise I don't listen or I don't look.
No, totally. It sort of can't be too tasteful, isn't it? Really.
I don't think so, but again, everyone's different, but that's my...
I agree with you, but I totally see that other people have different
yeah.
And and you talk about the fact that every room should sing, but you also kind of in this chapter on this project stress very much that it's also about the complete experience of a place, of a house, and that is kind of, and the balance of a whole. And so when you set off on a project like this and you want to achieve this balance, but yet you also, as you say, want each room to hum a little tune, how do you set about that?
I think actually the best, I mean, obviously you have to start somewhere. So like we'll start with the room, but to be honest, the way I prefer to do it is just do it as a whole. I kind of need to see the whole complete house to understand, like we'll see a bit later on in the slideshow, but some of the bedrooms are like kind of quite wild and out there. And I think that only really works because that living room overall is kind of pared back in somehow. So I think it's really important, you know, if you're going to go for like really bright color in one room, if, in my opinion, like if all the rooms had bright colors, it just would be overbearing and too much. So you kind of need to know what goes into different rooms. The other thing is that I find if you sort of try to sell that to a client, if they've seen that everything else is like a little bit more restrained, they feel more confident to go for, you know, what we did in the children's bedroom, for example. So to me, it's creating this rhythm where you like, you sort of, you push back and you give, and there's like a journey through the house as well. I think it's very important to think about make sure that there aren't rooms that aren't being used. So you want each room to have its own particular character. So even though they need to speak to each other, it also needs to be a reason to go to that room, because you want to like kind of experience that room and you don't have that feeling anywhere else in the house. So all of that needs to work as a whole. And I think the best way to do it is to kind of, you start in one room, but then kind of just go through everything and look at it as a whole and see what the overall balance is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I get that. Can we have the next image, which is of the kitchen, which kind of, is it coming? I don't know if it's coming. Here it comes. Which kind of, you talk in the book about elevating the ordinary, and the client sort of inherited this kitchen, and you know, I imagine it was nice, but not necessarily the most exciting. And so this kind of room in a way exemplifies that. But at the same time, it's a very calm, as far as I can see, kind of room. And
it is. So I think, for example, so basically, obviously kitchens, like it's a big expense, but it's also quite time consuming, ripping out a kitchen and putting a new one in. And we kind of had this, like we kind of had to have it done by, we only had sort of 4 or 5 months to do it. And also the kitchen was quite nice, but we painted it, we changed the handles and we changed the worktop. The floor that was there, ripping out a floor, it also had underfloor heating. It's also like a huge, almost like ripping out the floor was almost the most difficult thing to do. So rather than doing that, we put this like checkered lino flooring on top. Very into lino, which I think I got from my parents, but it's so thin and it works with underfloor heating, so you could put it on top of any floor that you might have, and it's not that expensive.
And does it come in the checker, or you cut it?
No, I picked the colors and then it was like laid in the checkered patterns. But you can do quite elaborate patterns and stuff like that if you like. Here we went for something quite simple. And you know, a lot of people, it normally takes some convincing when we show this to clients, because you know, a lot of people have that kind of, you know, school, that's the smell of it, although that's kind of why I like it as well. But also my parents have it in some places where I grew up, so therefore I guess I had quite positive feelings about it. But I also just think it's also very practical. It's sort of, I don't know, it's good for children, and it's sort of kind of forgiving if you spill things and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we did, which was in a way quite simple, but it really lifted it. The floor that was there before, I think, was more like a sort of, I think it was like a tile kind of terracotta floor. I can't exactly remember, but it was darker anyway. And then we put that fireplace in. They had another fireplace there before, which I think made such a difference. So the kitchen is obviously up to the left here of canvas, so to speak, and they don't have a dining room. So we wanted to make it feel a little bit more kind of special, even though it is their everyday dining table. And I think having that fireplace made a big difference. And then again, just mixing, it's got this Tuareg rug from Africa. It's got this Danish late 19th century table. The chairs are Swedish and new. And again, this kind of mix of different things coming together, and all the colors are pretty muted. So that's also why it feels calm, but because the styles are mixed, it kind of makes it feel vibrant at the same time.
Yeah, so I mean, I love the fact that you're sort of talking about elevating the ordinary, but yet that it never feels like it's trying too hard. They feel like they've sort of come together, I suppose, a lot of the elements of the room. And I mean, you can't see it here, but the fabric that you've chosen or created was kind of the design was taken from a tea towel, the sort of checks of a tea towel, but kind of writ large, and it's
exactly.
very effective. I think, so that we don't run out of time, can we go on to the snug images, please, James? Which again, I mean, really, it's just for you to show us the sort of thought that went into.
So this is kind of a room that comes off the kitchen and then kind of goes out into the garden, and they had this kind of exposed concrete walls. And I think with rooms, there were these kind of gardeny rooms that kind of join the garden with the main house, like really nice spaces, but they can also feel a bit cold. So we added the boarding here on the walls and on the ceiling. We also put this bespoke massive deep like kind of sofa in, which is a great place to kind of sit and read and stuff like that. And you're also sort of in the window, so even in winter it's kind of nice to feel sort of half outside. And it was also a kind of perfect place to put a television. And we were just thinking about how to make that. It's hard sometimes, you know, we try and hide televisions, but sometimes it's kind of easier, especially in such a small space, to just have it there. So we were just thinking about how we could make it look interesting. So we decided to kind of design this like kind of modern looking, but based on a kind of retro TV stand around the flat screen TV, which I'm really happy with. Yeah. And just be a little bit honest about what it was, and like actually make it look nice, even though it is a TV. So that was kind of the thinking behind here. And it's quite simple. It's just like a cozy place to sit and read and watch television. And it's great because the children, they're still quite small, and they can just run in here and sit there. And it's quite easy for the parents to still know where they are and not worry too much about what they might be up to.
Yeah, that's great. I want to be sitting in that room. The next slide we've got is the main bedroom, and I love the headboard was inspired by Lee Miller, a photograph of Lee Miller and Tanya Ram in Paris having breakfast in bed, and this was the headboard kind of picture.
I think it was a rug by Jean Cocteau that just hung behind them. Okay. And I always love that picture. Yeah, we just decided to kind of copy it basically. But we did make it, we made it as a rug, and then we made it into a headboard, so it's like upholstered and everything.
Brilliant. And then on the eiderdown was inspired, the pattern on it that you've kind of created on that was inspired by a 1920s photograph. And kind of you had another
this is like naked lady only wearing a black mask but nothing else, like sitting on her knees on an eiderdown with just this pattern on it, which I just thought was sort of so great as well.
Yeah, so you're taking and one of your chapters in your book is called Seeking Inspiration, but you're taking inspiration, you're not just reading a book on 9 kind of beautiful houses, you're taking your inspiration from all sorts, basically.
Yeah, definitely, anywhere that kind of, so that's the thing, I think it's much more about like a sort of frame of mind rather than necessarily like traveling lots. I was quite isolated growing up in the countryside, and I didn't really, if my parents have 4 children, so if they went on holiday they would just go without us, which I now find quite understandable. But so I kind of had from quite an early age learn how to kind of just entertain myself without necessarily going anywhere. So just looking at pictures wherever I might find them, and it could also be, you know, even going, you know, when they're open. I love going to art galleries, or even just looking at beautiful paintings, even if it's just online. And, you know, if you're just open-minded and observant, you can really find inspiration anywhere. And you just need to be, you know, observant when you get that feeling that something excites you, and then, you know, save that image somewhere and then go back to it once you need to think of new ideas for stuff.
Yeah, and then it's not about sort of copying, it's about making those ideas your own, isn't it, in a way?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's that, you know, that's like a whole topic in itself, like, you know, what you do with that. But I think it's, again, I write about that in the book, but I mean, to be totally honest, I think a lot of, like, almost everything that everyone does has come from something, you know, that's come before, and then hope, you know, the idea is that you make it into something new. But also, even, I don't know, like, even if you do like copy someone, as long as you know, say where that you're inspired by that person, I guess that goes quite a long way. But I don't know, it's like, I mean, that's a whole talk in itself.
No, absolutely. No, I just think it's interesting. And then
no, it's really interesting, and it's hard to know how to know. I also have to say, like, when I first started out, it's not something that I ever really thought about, because I never thought that anyone would like be looking at our interiors. To be totally, like, I'm now realizing that I should have probably thought about it a bit more. You know, when you see something that you love and a designer did, and you can just do that without thinking, because I never thought that anyone would be looking at the work.
You're creating a whole room, or a whole, in a way, you're using these kind of references in a different way.
No, exactly, and I think that's completely fine. I'm not going to stop doing that, but I'm sort of realizing now that
you've got to be a bit careful.
You have to be aware of it, and if you do it, of course you have to acknowledge. But I think it probably was a bit naive when I first started out, because I just never really thought. But we would never just, you know, copy someone else's room. But it's more like elements like that, like a pattern on a, you know, an eiderdown or whatever it is. But anyway, it's quite an interesting topic.
Yeah. We've got not got long left, so I just want to whiz through the next images. James, can we just show, this is the dressing room with the wallpaper that you've created
right here, so.
that is behind you, which is so smart. But I love the pendant, giving again that sort of tension, and I can't remember, but it's something not.
It's like a German Christmas decoration. And you actually get them, it was like £60. You get them, you actually see them quite a lot in Sweden, but not so much here. And again, it's in a way, it's like quite a grand room, but also part of the brief is just like and also I like to break things up, and I love in a way it's quite like a grand room, but then having like a £60 light pendant that's made out of paper, although the shape is very arresting and interesting. I think when you can find stuff like that, I love those, but I actually use those quite a lot. When you can find stuff like that, it's so important to include, you know, high and low, and it's very possible to find cheap things that are good and interesting. And it's important to kind of include that, I think, to not make it too fancy, basically, and make it relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's fun. And going on to the two bedrooms again, because you talked about that kind of, you went slightly more sort of wild with the bedrooms, which are amazing, because this is a children's bedroom, but yet it's not in any way childish. What's your take on children's bedroom?
I think actually a lot of people are a bit like, well, it's just for children, so we're not going to think about it too much. But I actually think bedrooms for children are almost the most important ones. I put on the cover of my book is my daughter's bedroom, for example, and I think it's one of my favorite rooms in our house, and I think they're going to grow up in these rooms. It's going to be imprinted in their minds forever, and creating something that's stimulating and interesting for them. I don't know, I think it's really important. And also I think, because I really like kind of these playful, like probably quite childish details. So I kind of really can't like get a bit carried away, because with children's rooms, people more accept me doing that a bit more. So I had a lot of fun putting this together.
Yeah, so and like the bedspreads you created.
Exactly. So we made actually Phoebe, who she doesn't work for me anymore, but who did this project with me. She called them the cow splat. But I actually would like to call them Matisse cutouts. But it's basically just like a sort of cotton chenille and then boiled black wool cut out in these shapes, and then it's like appliqued onto the throws. And yeah, I really love those. I'm very happy with them.
Yeah, very brilliant. And I mean, when you're, if I'm sitting here with all my fabric swatches trying to make I'd never sort of, with your neat little, I'd never come up with that sort of thing, but there.
I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Yeah, it's brilliant. We've got one more image, and we probably don't even hardly have time to talk about it, but which is this wonderful spare bedroom with its brilliant canopy and your new fabric. Tell us about fabric.
So this is the jumbo gingham, which is, it's like, one of the old classics, like, a gingham. And it's just, the idea is just to make again, like, other people have done a big gingham, but it's just something that I grew up with. And it's just a sort of, I love it because it's classic, but it still has personality. It's, in a way, it's kind of a bit like a neutral, but it's also has some quite big impact, and kind of goes in almost any setting, I think. So I'm really excited about that. And this room, it's just the guest room. Actually, they actually had this bed from before, but then we made the canopy and we like changed the fabric. But it was also, being a kind of guest room, it was a place to kind of be a bit more theatrical, but the fact that the kind of color combinations, I think, are still quite subtle and soft.
Great. And just to sort of end, I suppose, in a way, is that obviously we're now, well, as we're recording this, we're kind of, shops are opening up and we're able to out and about. And when you're kind of going to Chelsea Harbour, where are the places that you particularly, what are you looking forward to visiting?
I love Tissu de Laine, Tunnel and Shigon. I think I go there a lot, and Pierre Frey are probably my 3 top ones. I think they're going to be the most. But there's so many different places, like Abbott and Boyd are great too, and I think De La Corna is wonderful for kind of more simple things. And there's so much to discover. I look forward to coming back soon.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, doing my own project and looking at websites and looking at people's fabrics on a website, I'm just so looking forward to getting in there and actually seeing them in real life, and big pieces and all of that.
Me too.
But thank you so much, Beata, for doing this and sort of summing up your design principles kind of so articulately and elegantly, and it's kind of easy to follow. And I feel they feel sort of reassuring, although when it comes to the practicalities, I'm not sure if I can put them all into action. But and your book, it kind of says all this in so much more detail. So
thank you so much.
If people haven't already got it, they really should track it down.
Thank you very much. That was great chatting.